index numbers are very useful for making comparisons, especially over time. Sociologists are interested in looking at index numbers to see what's happening with population changes. Businesses look at index numbers to look at share prices. Psychologists use index numbers to consider intelligence levels of populations. The measure usually works by establishing a base which is given the number 100. Variations are then measured from that. So the average intelligence is supposed to give a number of 100. If you have an IQ of 130, you're supposed to be 30% more intelligent than the average. Perhaps the most common use of index numbers is in measuring the extent of price increases in the goods and services that we buy. One measure of that is the gross domestic product. Now, GDP tends to rise for two reasons. One, we produce more goods and services. Two, the prices of these things is going up. Now, index numbers are very useful in separating out these two effects. But to do that, we first need to be clear on what we mean by GDP, and we can do that by looking at a particular European economy. How much output does a society produce in the course of a year? It sounds a remarkably simple question. All you do is take the output that everybody produces, multiply it by the price it sells for, and you've got the output. It's a simple way of doing it, and it's wrong. And the reason that it's wrong is that you are double counting. You're counting some outputs more than once. You see, some of the output which is made isn't sold to consumers at all. It's made and sold to other producers. So the farmer grows his wheat and he doesn't sell it to consumers. He sells it to millers who take this wheat and turn it into flour. And then the flour is sold on to the bread manufacturer who turns it into bread. So if we took the output of the farmer's wheat, the miller's flour, and the bread producer's bread, we'd be hopelessly overstating the total amount of output that's produced. We'd be double counting some of the output. So the way over the problem is this. Way one, we just count the output that is sold to consumers. So for this particular industry, ignore the contribution of the farmer producing the wheat, ignore the contribution of the flour producer, and simply say how many loaves of bread were produced and what's the price. We only count the final output. Possibility number two is to say, let's look at the contribution made by each producer by asking what's its value added, what's the difference between the value of the output they produce and the value of the inputs bought from some other industry. So we take the farmer's wheat, he sells the wheat for 100 euros to this miller. The miller takes 100 euros worth of grain, turns it into 200 euros worth of flour. What's the miller done? He's added 100 euros worth of value to the wheat. That is his value added. If we do the same thing now with the bread producer, value the output of the bread, minus inputs from the miller, we've got the value added at that stage in the production process. If we add up the values added of each stage in the process, we've got the total value of output to society, which is exactly the same as the value of the output that we found when we ignored intermediate output and went straight to the final producer, the bread manufacturer. So we've got these two ways of doing it. All the national income accounts that you'll see use that second way. And the reason for using the second way is that if you looked at national income accounts in the first way, you'd never know that there were any farmers. You'd never know that there were any millers. But doing it via value added and you see the contributions made of all producers in all industries within the country.